Thanks you for joining this afternoon. I know it's a busy time for many individuals. This session, we're going to cover and learn how to monitor and manage a remote customer service team, which seems to be obviously a very hot topic given the circumstances and world events. So let's get started. So just to anchor the conversation here a little bit, a couple important or relevant data points. First and foremost, as of today, about a third of the world population is actually on lockdown. Here in the States alone, 95% are actually under stay-at-home orders. So obviously a significant disruption to the way and manner in which organizations and customers are typically used to doing business. And as you can imagine, call volumes as a result have climbed significantly across all industries and has done so very, very quickly. Obviously, in the beginning, call volumes to airlines and tourism-based industries, hotels and so forth, saw a big pickup because people were canceling reservations and flights and looking for refunds and rebookings. Now you look at government institutions, whether here in the US or globally, are seeing a lot of increase in volume while their citizens are reaching out, asking to understand their benefits better. Here in the US, it's small businesses trying to get loans from the new government loan program, or it can be individuals who are recently furloughed and looking for unemployment services or an explanation of what their unemployment benefits are. Or it could be the healthcare industry for a number of obvious reasons. And at the same time, perhaps an understated use case is help desks for organizations or within organizations. Teams of, let's say, IT individuals that were staffed to support an organization in good times, maybe with 10 or 20 headcount, those same individuals now are expected to onboard massive organizations as individuals and institutions try to work as efficiently from home as they once did from the office. And as you can imagine, telephony is one of the preferred channels when things are complex. It's not that digital channels are failing. Quite the contrary. This is a phenomenal time for digital channels to help deflect the need to call an organization, specifically for easy or repetitive tasks, resetting my password, frequently asked questions, application processes, and so forth. But at the end of the day, when things are deemed critical by an individual, time sensitive or complex, well over half will actually prefer to reach out to a live human resource, very often bypassing self-service altogether. And so what aggravates the issue, and part of what we'll be talking about today, is that if you look at how organizations are currently set up, just under half of them actually don't have a work from home policy, which means that they actually are not organized technologically, or maybe even from a process point of view, to address what is currently going on in the world with regards to the need to work from home by virtue of the lockdowns and the stay-at-home orders. And the reason being could be for a host of different reasons. It could be technological. From a call center perspective, if you're managing legacy on-premise systems, those systems are not necessarily flexible or easy to reorient. Or it could be as simple as your desk phone is at the office, and unless you can go and grab it, you simply are no longer part of that call center initiative. At the same time, you also have complications around just how you're set up at home. If you as an institution are using multiple platforms, or your agents are using 3, 4, or 5 different platforms, maybe to manage the different channels that they are responsible for. One screen for chat, one for telephony, one for emails, and maybe one for your CRM or system of record. All of a sudden, when they go home, they are down or restricted down to presumably their laptop, a single screen. So the user experience for the agents can be complicated and complicate work from home in general. And then, of course, administratively, the same issues apply. If in the past, and this is a big part of what we'll be covering today, if in the past, as an institution or as an administrator or supervisor, you are operationally set up to be able to walk the halls and listen and visually see your agents work, or help them in real time with face-to-face engagements, coaching, and so forth, Obviously, things presumably, if work from home is presumably the new normal, is going to change. You will have to be able to coach and monitor your team from a distance, hopefully not at the expense of how well you can perform those functions and lend that support to your team. And that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit. So by virtue of introduction, my name is Guillaume. I'm a vice president here at 3CLogic, and I've actually been in the customer service experience industry for well over 15 years with a background in software as a service and cloud technologies. So this is something that that I'm comfortable with and that I've witnessed evolve over time. And what we're going to cover in today's session, which we've kind of hit on a little bit, is number one, focus on what are some of the tools, administrative tools that are available to you as a supervisor, as an administrator of call center agents or customer support teams, specifically from the perspective of dashboards, analytics, agent quality management tools, and so forth. And if you're wondering why it might matter, well, if work from home was popular and growing in adoption, but still a nice to have, a privilege, if you will, the reality is that recent events have really highlighted its importance and significance when you consider business continuity. And so, if not already, certainly moving forward, the adoption of work from home and the tools that will be required for those types of work from home teams, for that to be successful, is likely going to accelerate. And then towards the end, we'll obviously spend a little bit of time talking about what are some of the things that you can do to quickly enable you and your team to make the shift and start adopting, presumably, the new normal. So let's talk about some of the challenges when it comes to migrating to a remote form of management. First and foremost, most often real-time dashboards in customer service or call center type environments are useful. They're on big TV screens, but they're not actionable. They're not interactive. From a distance, you will actually need to have dashboards that not only provide you information, but allow you to act on what that information is telling you. If there's an alert that goes up, you need to be able to act on the alert, not just necessarily be witness to it. Another challenge typically has everything to do with access to data. Very often, under the best of circumstances, a lot of the largest enterprises already make the access to data difficult. It's limited. It might be manually intensive. It could be distributed across platforms. Very often, and surprisingly even today, a lot of organizations have to export information from different sources and inevitably end up doing a lot of things in Excel. So on a good day, it's not user-friendly, but holistically, it's certainly not efficient. If you're working from home and you're trying to manage a team from a distance, having access to data in real time that is actionable and easy to manipulate is going to drive a lot of value in terms of how efficiently you manage that team. 2 or 3 here is the ability to monitor and coach. It's no longer going to be face-to-face. You won't have the luxury to sit next to an individual and coach them through a conversation. So all of a sudden, coaching and monitoring your agents is going to take a slightly different form. It's going to be heavily contingent on the quality of the tools that you have at your disposal, not just in terms of the analytical capabilities, but how can you in fact coach an individual from a distance in a meaningful and helpful way. And last but not least, data in of itself is helpful, but we don't want you to manage your call center, your agents in a vacuum. Telephony may not be the only channel through which citizens or customers may choose to reach you. They may also use some of those digital channels that I alluded to. And ideally, the information that's known about those customers may not necessarily, or presumably is not stored in your call center or contact center platform. So being able to merge those two worlds and bring those data points together is going to drive a lot of value. And all these data points are things that are already difficult before we had some of the circumstances unfold in recent months and weeks. These are going to be amplified if you don't already have them addressed. But again, we're going to cover some of the things that you can do to make things a little bit easier for you either now and in the foreseeable months to come. So with that, we're going to dive into a live demonstration of what are some of the work from home administrative tools that exist today. Some of them you may already be using, some of them presumably you are not. There should be some interesting things when we reach speech analytics as a use case. So hopefully you'll find this useful and informative. So first and foremost, we'll start with the basics. Most individuals are usually familiar with some type of real-time dashboard or wallboard. In this case, this is an inbound wallboard And these wall boards or dashboards typically provide high level information with regards to the overall health of your customer service or help desk or call center team. So for example, how many calls have come through, how many calls are in queue, what is the average speed of answer? So how quickly are you as an institution able to reach a customer that's waiting to have an inquiry serviced? What are your service level agreements, average talk time? What is your agent availability, and so on and so forth. And of course, most of us are used to seeing this in an amplified way on the big screen. And this kind of gives you a snapshot in the moment, in real time, of just how well your operations are presumably running. What you'll need in the future moving forward, especially if you're working from home, in this case, I'm working from my home office, I'm working from a laptop, so this is all one screen for me. As I'm looking at this information, I also presumably want to be able to drill down into what that information has to reveal. So for example, knowing that I have an overall abandonment rate of 7%, if I have 10 or 15 different teams, doesn't really tell me a whole lot. It might tell me that on the surface, maybe 7% is good. Presumably that's a little high. But if I were to actually be able to click on it, I'd then be able to see, okay, well, what is the actual distribution of my abandonment rate across the different teams for which I, as a supervisor, might be responsible for? And that obviously paints a slightly different picture. You can see here in this case, my inside sales team is really standing out as an outlier with an abandonment rate of 25%, which in our industry is typically considered extremely high. I would argue even poor. So again, if a dashboard allows you to understand holistically what are your average performance rates, if you can actually drill down and act or start interfacing with that information, it might actually provide you an idea of where you should be looking or what might be hiding beneath the surface that you as a supervisor or as a manager should otherwise be aware of. Same thing, for example, in this case, I see that I have 9 agents available and it tells me, how many are active, away, busy, available. And what's useful here is you can actually click on these screens as well and see, okay, 2 agents are available, specifically which of those 2 agents are available. And again, we're talking at it from the perspective of agents are working geographically dispersed. You don't have the luxury of being able to stand up and see who's performing and who's not. And so being able to interact with these dashboards is what allows you to drill down into the information that is now data-driven as opposed to perhaps visual, as you might be used to. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and actually look at a different wallboard here, which is a supervisor wallboard. Now, supervisor wallboards are meant to get into the very granular information. And again, the benefit here is to potentially draw attention to things that merit your awareness, potentially your intervention. So you've got everything from queue statistics, the status of your different agents, who's active, who's available, who's away, who's busy, what are their sub-statuses if they're busy. You have the calls that are in queue, as well as the performance of your calls across the different teams that you might manage for. So how many calls are in queue, what's the longest average wait time, the different service level agreements, whether or not you're hitting them or not, and so on and so forth. So this allows you to effectively manage your team from a distance, presumably slicing and dicing the different views that you might need with regards to your team to understand where can you lend your support and where or what should you be aware of that potentially might require some form of escalation. Now, one of the things that you might want to do, and I've heard this time and time again, is as a supervisor, be able to interact with your agents, right? So in this case, I see Dave is available. I also see that Larry is away. It could be, in the case of Dave here, that I know for a fact that Dave forgot to mark himself away, that he's actually on vacation, but he forgot to log out. From your dashboard, you can do fancy things like being able to do a forced shutdown. You could also send Dave a message, or in this case, you could actually change his availability so that it actually mirrors the state that Dave is actually in. Vice versa, you might have someone that's marked away like Larry that actually shouldn't be out to lunch. It's past his lunchtime. So maybe I want to take Larry, put Larry back into a state of available so that he can actually contribute and be a member of the team, and not necessarily prolong how often or how long a customer has to wait to reach the next available agent. So all of a sudden now you have a supervisor dashboard that is providing you data, and data that you can now act on or interact with. Another example for in this case would be to be able to create conditions that can draw your eye to things that merit your attention. So for example, we have conditions here that were built that say, hey, if the wait times exceed 5 minutes or they go above 6 minutes, okay, we would like to create an alert that is either color coded or it could be an audio beep. And you can see here, sure enough, there are 3 different instances where individuals have been waiting in queue, in this case, over 5 minutes, and now you've got the red that it exceeds that 6-minute threshold. And you can put these types of alerts just about anywhere. So for example, you might want to create an alert here because your SLA is now only 75% as opposed to perhaps the 90% requirement that you as an organization may have set. And so the ability to create those types of conditions and alerts, and again, the alerts could be audio or visual, help you understand, again, where you can lend assistance. And again, the goal here is, of course, to help your customers, make sure that they have a good experience, but it could also be to help your agents so that they can actually provide that higher level of customer engagement and service. So this is an idea of what real-time dashboards can be and should be if you don't have something similar available to you today. A lot of rich information, and the idea here is that you can interface or interact with it in addition to creating conditions that can draw your attention to things that merit that attention. But of course, managing a team is not all about managing in the moment. You also want to be able to look at your team holistically and over a period of time and spot trends, as well as potentially have to share some of those results with individuals outside of your organization, senior leadership, things of that nature. So of course, one of the things you'd want is the ability to create your own reports and access that information without necessarily having to export it from different data sources and go into Excel. So an example of what you might use is, for example, the ability to build your own reports. And of course, depending on the type of report you build, you might have different metrics that it allows you to then measure or solve for. So if I pick an agent report as opposed to, let's say, a DNIS report, you can see that the KPIs are going to change. So a good platform for remote enablement purposes presumably is going to have all the different KPIs that allow you to slice and dice. Not suggesting that all of these will be relevant to you, but at the end of the day, you'd want a platform that doesn't make that decision for you and instead makes all those data points easily accessible. And then it's up to you to build those reports. So for example, if I were to build a quick report here, I might say, I want to build an annual report. We'll try and draw some data here. Maybe for all the different teams and projects that you have, maybe for all the agents that you might have, right? And you can drag and drop that information and then start selecting the different KPIs that might appeal to you. So number of inbound calls, how many outbound calls have we fielded? What's the average talk duration? How many transfers have we made? Typical things that you might want to solve or measure for. And then you can manipulate X and Y axes, of course, and in less than 30 seconds, here's all your information across the different agents that you might have. And of course, you can present that information visually depending on what type of data you might be running. And then more importantly, once you've built the report, let's try and remove the need to manually recreate that in each instance. And instead, you can name the report, schedule it, and then you can either run it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis and either email it to yourself or those individuals that have need for that information. You could export it to a different data source. Maybe you want to integrate these data points with other third-party data points, perhaps with an Amazon Tableau, for example. Or you could create webhooks where we're posting information to a workforce management platform, for example. So the benefit here is, in addition to your real-time wallboards and dashboards, do you have the ability to run analytics that go beyond, let's say, a 12-hour cycle, so you can look at and spot trend the performance over time of your agents and your call center as a whole. Now, much of what I've shown you is par for the course, right? One of the things that you might want to also consider, which is relatively cutting edge with regards to where things stand in the market now, is also looking at how to provide quality management services and administrative functions as it relates to training and oversight of the calls themselves, your agents. Obviously, you could listen to a subset of call recordings. If you had 1,000 calls come in over the course of a day, maybe you might listen to 100 of them and pull out 3 or 4 to provide commentary and coaching to your agents. Of course, that might completely ignore the 15 that you missed because they weren't a part of your sampling. What you have here in front of you is an opportunity or an example of what speech analytics could provide and enable you with regards to spot chatting all your calls. So for example, can we transcribe a conversation and based on that transcription, overlay it with AI and machine learning so that you can actually break up or have the platform break up the call into sub attributes and then organize them between negative, neutral, and positive type sentiment. So for example, in this instance, the agent actually successfully displayed patience and courtesy. In this instance, they were empathetic. However, here, there was a hold time violation. They kept the customer on hold for too long. You could also start spot chatting the sentiment of the customer themselves. Was there a point where the call was starting to reach a boiling point? Was there negative customer sentiment? And the goal is all these attributes allow you to identify and effectively rank the success of each and all of your engagements, not just the ones that you as a supervisor might sample. And it allows you to use this as a coaching tool for your agents. So if you recall, when you're thinking of things from a remote standpoint, you don't have the luxury of walking along the hallways and sort of hearing, here and there, different bits and pieces of a conversation that might catch your ear and then draw you to the agent to help them through a call. You also don't have the luxury of an agent raising their hand and saying, dear Mr. or Mrs. Supervisor, I need some help here. You have to be able to have awareness of the quality of your engagements from a distance, and leveraging a tool like speech analytics can provide that level of granular visibility, draw your attention and flag the calls that actually deserve your attention, and provide you the tools to understand where and how you might be able to help the agent. So it's as constructive as it is for you as an awareness or an alert tool, as it is for the agents when you start walking back through the conversation and teach them how to perhaps address the same issue in a different manner, perhaps a better manner. So analytics is a big piece of the equation. Now we've covered the significance and the importance of looking at real-time dashboards and wallboards and making sure they're actionable. We've taken a quick look at some of the reports or the ease with which you might want to be able to build reports from a distance. And we've also taken a look at what are the benefits of applying speech analytics into your environment to help facilitate or solve for the fact that you're not going to be in the office, you and your agents together, to fulfill some of that face-to-face interaction that you might have been dependent on to date. The other thing we want to highlight on, which was one of the final points here, and let me log back in here, is the benefit of taking all that data and actually integrating it with a system of record that you might be using here. Let me just make sure I'm logging in properly here. So again, one of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to necessarily have to look at information dispersed over different platforms. In this case, you'll notice we've got the exact same wallboards. I'm using ServiceNow here as an example use case. So imagine you're using ServiceNow for your customer service management initiatives. It could be Microsoft Dynamics or some other platform. But you can see here, I as an agent or as a supervisor, I may also be restricted down to one screen when in the past, I may have had the luxury of having multiple screens. So now we are able to merge the wallboards and dashboards that I showed you in a way that incorporates it into your customer service management platform. So now I too, as an administrator, have the ability to operate from a single user experience, no different than my agents might be as well. And so again, this is the same information that I showed you earlier, but now provided in an integrated form for ease of use and for it to be a little bit more efficient for your operational needs on a day-to-day basis. So integrating the use cases with your system of record certainly would help alleviate some of the headaches that working from home might suddenly cause. But we also want to look at it from a reporting standpoint. As much as you can run your own reports on call data, as I've shown you earlier, if you can mix that call data with some of the other data that might be specific to your platform. So for example, if people are calling about inquiries, are those inquiries already broken down by type of inquiry? And if so, can I understand what the volume or call volume distribution might be across those inquiries? So for example, if I were to look at, let's say I'm managing different cases here or tickets, can I look at the distribution of calls based on the case type? So it looks like a disproportionate amount of calls here coming in based on new feature requests. Well, presumably that might be something that you can in fact digitize using a knowledge portal or something of that nature, and take some of these new feature requests and offload them to a self-service type environment, again, to deflect and make sure that the calls that do reach you are the ones that actually merit the attention of your agents. So for example, maybe the calls around outages would you rather be highlighted so that your agents can have the luxury of spending more time addressing those more complex use cases without necessarily feeling the need to rush to address all the calls that might be coming in. The only way you can understand the distribution of the types of calls is to start merging call data with the platform that presumably your agents might be leveraging, where the majority of the information about your customers, your workflows resides. So it's not just solving for remote use cases from a channel perspective, but how can you incorporate channels into the platforms that actually are operating or performing the operations in the background. And ideally, again, in this case, provide yourself and your agents a single user experience. Now I'm down to one screen, despite the fact that I'm using multiple platforms. So we covered a few things here. Let's go ahead and make sure we hit on some of the takeaways. Number one, if I haven't convinced you yet, presumably if you look outside, based on the fact that already organizations are changing, remote work is likely to become a new normal. Maybe not the de facto, but if it was a nice to have, a privilege in the past, the adoption of work from home use cases, whether it's with agents, supervisors, as well as the technology that will be required for work from home, it's certainly on the rise. It's gone well beyond a trend. Two, to effectively manage a remote team is going to be very dependent on the quality and flexibility of your reporting and analytical tools. If you have simply dashboards in the office space today, you're going to need those dashboards as well as access to the information in a form that grants you the ability for that data to be actionable. And ideally, you also want to make sure that that information is integrated with the various systems that today or up till now, you might have had the luxury of putting on multiple screens, but now need to shrink down to a smaller footprint. It's going to drive more efficiency, so it's not a bad thing, but it will also allow you to commingle data sets that perhaps historically have been held separate, and allow you to pull the veil back and presumably draw conclusions that perhaps had been hidden until now. So again, remote work is likely something that's going to increase in its adoption. So what you use to facilitate those use cases is what's going to cause or allow you to facilitate and solve for a lot of those challenges. And then also merging your systems. This is as good a time as any to consider what are some of the integration points that you can create that are going to make your life, as well as the life of your agents, a lot easier. So a little bit about us. If you're not familiar with 3CLogic, we, if you haven't guessed it, are a cloud call center platform. We specialize in modernizing communication for large enterprises across both employee and customer audience bases. Our customers vary across industries, global 2,000 customers, and across the globe, across 4 continents. And we have the luxury of being hosted on Amazon Web Services. So as a cloud solution, we have that scalability, the flexibility, and the reliability that sometimes on-premise or legacy systems that perhaps you've been relying on to date don't necessarily have or can offer, certainly not in a quick turnaround. So on behalf of the 3CLogic team, I hope that what we shared with you today was both helpful and informational as you try and determine what are some of the features and functions that you might choose to leverage if you are in fact looking to enable a work from home workforce. If there's any questions, comments, or use cases that you would like to explore with our team, by all means, reach out to us at info@3clogic.com. In addition, we will continue to have sessions like these throughout the course of this year. So if you enjoyed what we had to share with you and would like to learn more about some of the tips and tricks that we've seen over the years, by all means, stay tuned, keep in touch. We'll send you additional notifications as those sessions become available, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks, and have a great day.